All right. So, thanks, Johnny, for coming and doing this first inaugural podcast episode for the whole Backstage Theater. And I'm happy to be talking to you about Black Tie, the whole series, every show you've done, which includes what? Broadway, America,
and
Christmas. Yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of other folks that want me to do like Black Tie Appalachia and Black Tie Gospel and things like that. Fun. So, that could be in the works later on.
Good. What kind of music would that all include? So I have the surface level, like you do a little bit of country or bluegrass or...
Yes. Yes. Let's just answer it that way.
Yes.
Black Tie Country, I think the Black Tie Appalachia, is one that several people have asked me about, and it would include, bluegrass and Appalachian music and homespun stuff like that.
Nice. Be interested to hear that.
Yeah, yeah.
Or singing it, either way.
Yeah.
So the Black Tie series as a whole, within this theater, we're sitting right now in the whole Backstage Theater in Guntersville, and you've done all 3 iterations in this theater?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I have.
And some more than once?
Some, just the Black Tie Christmas.
Okay.
Now, other things that led up to the Black Tie productions, we've done more than once. And some of those, I think you're familiar with because you participated in a couple, were, the Fabulous 50s series, the USO series, which basically was a patriotic and led up into, what I deem as Black Tie America. And then we've done a show that originated as a choral kind of show choir ensemble, was something called I Love Christmas back in the 1990s. So it's kind of evolved into this Black Tie series, Black Tie Productions.
So where did Black Tie come from? Was it something that hit you that you just had to organize and get out to people, or was it a process over time from different forms or different influences? Or
well, I've always loved the idea of a musical review, and starting back in 1981, I became the music director of what was known as the Whole Backstage Holiday Show, and we titled it the musical review of, and whatever year, 1981, 1982, and we had them mostly in the early 80s, and we'd skip a few years, and it was always around Christmas. That's the time that we could get everybody involved. People, college students that were away at school, people had some time where they were coming back from coming back to visit family in Guntersville, and it evolved out of that. We'd skip a few years, and I think the last review of that kind was in 1989. Beginning in 1990, I developed an hour-long, it was really kind of short, Christmas review based on a piece that I used when I taught, when I taught high school choir, and it was called I Love Christmas by Ed Lejensky. Now, this particular piece was a choir piece, but it had a variety of Christmas music. It had like 25, 26 Christmas songs, and they were all short versions. It had Haul Out the Holly and Holly Jolly Christmas and things like that. And this would be the beginning, I think, of the creation of the musical review format that I would later develop into the Black Tie series.
Okay, so that... the musical review of the years went about 10 years?
Went about 10 years on and off during that 10 years.
In this building? In
this building. And what it really was, it was greatest show tunes of the whole Backstage during that time. It was just kind of like Black Tie Broadway, but we had one day of rehearsal. And we would rehearse on that Saturday morning.
Whose idea was that?
Well, we couldn't get everybody. That was the thing.
Yeah.
We couldn't get everybody until that one day.
Okay.
And we actually had an orchestra back then. I directed the orchestras.
Local people?
Local people. We had maybe one string player, if you want to call that an orchestra. But for the most part, it was, people that had played in our orchestras in the past. And it was a lot of fun. And I arranged the music. And eventually we would sing a Christmas song with the audience at the end. But it was... Edwin Weaver, come out and sing a song. Jan Price, come out and sing a song. It was just walk out to the center and sing a song.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything as involved as in Black Tie Broadway.
Oh, that's great. That's I would love to see something like that or be in something like that if that ever came back to this building. That sounds like a good community event and a season. It could be tailored.
Well, it could, and I think the only downfall was if the singer forgot the words or something like that, because there were times where we would have to stop
with the one day.
Yeah, with the one day of rehearsal, and there were certain performers back then that could only come to the concert, and I would say, here's your lead sheet, and they would go, oh, it's short. I said, yeah,
it is.
It's short. We had to cut it down for time, and it was a lot of fun. Let me just say, it was a lot of fun.
I can imagine. So with the Black Tie series, which iteration, Christmas, America, or Broadway, kind of came about first? And I guess, does each iteration lend itself to multiple versions?
Yes. It would have to be the Christmas review, but first the organized, the very first organized kind of staged, rehearsed, multi-song review that we produced was in 1990 by a former whole backstage participant, and he was also on the board of directors, Andy Powell. It was called Standing Room Only, and I was very fortunate to be a performer in that particular review, and it was that huge success show that everybody came to, and it was loaded with super talented folks. And this was one of the very first times that we had people from Birmingham, people from Huntsville, people from Gadsden, all coming to perform in a show. And so it was staged. I kind of took the idea of the black suits, black tuxedos, black dresses, and incorporated them into the Black Tie series from this particular show. Now, I Love Christmas was the thing that started it all for me. As for multiple versions, I continued to add Christmas songs just about every time we did this thing, the I Love Christmas series. And I directed it for Sneed State back in 96, but here at the whole backstage we did it in 1990, again in 1998, 2002, and 2007, and every time I would replace a couple of songs, add a couple of songs. Just what was the Christmas mood at the time? The last time we did this in 2007, the I Love Christmas, just the straight I Love Christmas, we added the Grinch songs because that was, the big thing that came out during that time. But the Black Tie series, I guess, is the quintessential kind of themed review that grew out of those experiences from Standing Room Only and all of the early I Love Christmas programs.
Yeah. So what you mentioned with the Grinch just now kind of demonstrates how this show, whether it's Black Tie Christmas or America, you can have different versions, but they can also be tailored culturally.
Exactly.
To time period, location, even on depending on what's popular there, what people would come listen to.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. And the best thing about having a review of this type was simply getting feedback from audience members and from performers, saying, hey, why don't you add this? Why don't we do this?
Right.
And then this in the version of Black Tie Broadway, we've only done that one time, but that was a huge production. That's a massive production, and I've already had people wanting me to do it again, but this time let's add some of the new contemporary musicals, like from Waitress, and because back in 2015 those shows weren't even out at that time.
Right.
No.
So, mentioning feedback from participants and audience members, has there been one show more than the others that you've worked with collaborators or like a creative partner, or where a particular amount of input has come from, or is it just something that's just pops up in your head and you want to get it organized and like share it?
Well, let me kind of look at my notes here, because you did give me kind of a follow through.
It'd be on the last.
Probably
last page.
Yeah, there it is.
I jumped
there it is.
because we were talking about kind of creating it and getting feedback and putting things together. So that kind of tied with that one.
Well, this particular version has of Black Tie Broadway. It really should be named Johnny Brewer's favorite Broadway songs of all times. And when I talk to other groups, and I've talked to ladies' book clubs and Rotary clubs and things like that, and they always ask that question: how did this come around, and how do you get involvement in it? And as I tell everyone, the concept is a one-man journey, but the reality is to engage the community. It's also to get those that share a love of music, ask for the best help from the people that will help me create this vision. In the end, it's a major collaboration. It really is, with everyone involved. And the idea might be mine, but by the end of the process and getting to the end of the product, it's everybody that shares in the success.
Yeah. Well, thinking about it being a community project and a choir made up of community members or past cast members of show that song may have been in, it is a huge collaborative effort that, once you think about the scale of the project, ends up being quite extensive. So thinking about choir sizes and how many participants have come through the years, what is your ideal, like if you were going to put together, handpick a choir, everybody was available, everybody could come, and you were going to just put a choir together to sing, let's say maybe Black Tie America. Mm-hmm. What's your ideal choir size, and does it change through each iteration?
It does. Now, keep in mind that we've only Black Tie America and Black Tie Broadway have only had one section. Now I've had earlier versions, like of Black Tie America. I developed something early on called USO and USO: A Sentimental Journey, and then several years later, I kind of changed that up, and I created something called USO and the American Spirit. And it changed from more of the 40s swing music to more of the patriotic music in the second version of it. And that kind of changed and shifted to a more choral work, as in Black Tie America. Now, like in Black Tie Broadway, it was more movement on stage. We had props, we had costumes, like when we did songs from The Sound of Music, we did Do Re Mi, and we had the costumes from when I directed Sound of Music in 2008. We had the Surrey when somebody sang Surrey with the fringe on top.
I remember that one from it was sitting on the side stage, and when it was time, who was it? Todd that
Yeah.
did that. Yeah, just rolled it right out there.
Yeah,
and rolled it right back.
and sang with the Surrey and rolled it back out. But that was, that was more theatrical, if you want to say, as Black Tie Broadway was, whereas Black Tie America was more choral. It was more, we had the risers, and so talking about choir size, I would love the largest choir possible. And for Black Tie Broadway, even though it was a job to move everybody on stage, we had up to 65, 66 people singing. Whereas in Black Tie America, we had almost 75, 80 people singing in that. And here's another thing to consider. In a sit-down, kind of like Black Tie Christmas and Black Tie America, the people that did not want to memorize music, everybody had to memorize their music in Black Tie Broadway, and didn't want to walk out and go into formations like we did in Black Tie Broadway. They were more apt to come and sing in a sit-down choral setting. There were more solos in Black Tie Broadway. There were more choral 4-part harmony, sometimes 6-part harmony in the Black Tie Christmas and in Black Tie America. So, what's the number?
As many as can fit on stage.
Absolutely. When we rehearse, we're sitting in a room right now where we had 70 people at one time singing, and we had to literally put them outside in the lobby. We had chairs set up around, and that's a great feeling, but it's also a great sound.
It is,
to have that many people, and plus, I'm sure our listeners can hear the echo that we're.
It's possible. We'll find out when we play it back.
Yeah, Mike can hear the echo. Just think, sitting in this room with 70 people singing 4-part harmony.
Yeah,
it gets a little echo. But nonetheless, Black Tie Christmas and Black Tie America are more structured for choral ensemble and not the show choir. Our listeners, I'm sure, have folks or have participated in the show choir, series in high school, and when I say show choir, I mean stage movement, props, and choreography. So as far as the ideal choir size, it'll always vary, from 75 to 100. And in our upcoming production, I think it'll get past Sunday at the board meeting. We're doing Black Tie Christmas again, and this will be our third time to do Black Tie Christmas. And so I'm looking for 100 singers.
So for reference sake, we're recording this in May of 2022. So hopefully on the schedule will be Black Tie Christmas for December 2022. Third weekend? Second weekend?
I think it's the 9th, 10th, and 11th.
Okay. So that'd be really good. I'm looking forward to that.
Well,
because
I hope you'll sing. I'm trying to make him to give us a commitment right now.
Yes. I would love to be in that show. Now, would you do a show, say Broadway? Mm-hmm. Would you do Black Tie Broadway with a small ensemble, or would you wait until you could have the big choir? Because that show sounded like it would lend itself to a smaller ensemble just because of the nature of the songs and how they're written for an ensemble cast on Broadway, obviously. So,
right.
Not all of them have access to 100 people. If you had like 20, would you do that show, or would you want to just have within a large group, a group of 20 people do a song or two in that show, or a group of 8 people?
Well, I think if we had to take in one of your questions to me earlier, just for me to preview your questions, that'll kind of explain why I do some of the things I do. Could we do Black Tie Broadway with a smaller ensemble? Yes, but we would have to alter the show that would kind of take out the participants of like the young people, because we can do up to 20, like 20 seconds of a song without getting in any kind of infringement.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
And so it kind of lends itself in a choral sense for like Black Tie Broadway to be big and boisterous, and just in a large ensemble and hitting that sound to the audience and let him go, whoa, this is a big sound.
Yeah.
Where I think if we did it with a smaller ensemble, let's say 20 people, they have to be mighty powerful singers. I mean, just mighty powerful singers to produce the same effect.
And the length of the show and the difficulty of some of the music would be a lot on a small group to put together, honestly, and perform over and over.
Right. Because I'll just be honest here in the podcast that there were some singers that soprano, alto, tenor, bass just equaled unison for them, singing the melody. That was it. And they did a good job singing the melody, not bass part.
Yeah. in various octaves, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
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 So thinking about this project, what comes to my mind is what you just mentioned, length of a clip before you get into any kind of infringement.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the legal hurdles in putting together different shows like this? I'd imagine a lot of the Christmas music is open or public domain.
Well,
and that's just a guess, but I'm thinking a lot has licenses attached. And
yes. The legal hurdles in putting a show like this together are kind of tricky. Of course, copyright infringement is a big concern, and I have music that's published and copyrighted arrangements out there myself, and I respect the creative and the intellectual property of others, and you have to do that. Now, the whole backstage is a member of ASCAP and BMI, and we pay a yearly fee to use published music for public performance, and that's generally intermission music that we play and pre-show music that we play. But as with the Black Tie series, we use mostly published choral works that has performance royalties kind of built in. We don't change a lot of it. We can do certain sections in certain choral works, pull it out, do it by itself. But for that's why you'll see me using a lot of choral pieces, like high school choral pieces that we can adapt for, big adult choir. I've added, some like non-print music, and just to kind of give you an example, I've gone to every link to get permission for royalties. For example, in Black Tie America, we used a song to open the review from Mannheim Steamroller called The American Spirit. And Greg Leach, I don't know if you remember, in Black Tie America, he did the narration. But I had to spend months contacting the publisher and finally found an email address for Chip Davis, who is the arranger of the background music under that narration. And I explained what we were doing, and he gave us permission to use his arrangement.
That's great.
Because, the legal ramifications of it could be very difficult.
And a lot of times it is, well, I say it's as simple, but you went through quite a bit to get that contact. But after you had it, reaching out was, he was responsive to that. So that's good.
He was. And he was very responsive to the community theater spirit of it all, He, in Black Tie Broadway, I wanted to use a song and needed the track to a printed choral, an out-of-print choral arrangement called the Oz Whiz Medley. And I found the website of the famed choral arranger Kirby Shaw. You might have heard of Kirby Shaw. And he quickly gave me a written okay to use this, and he sent me the lost accompaniment track for the song, just on his own, no charge or anything like that. Now, I have had circumstances where we've had to pay $100 or maybe $200 or $300 to be able to have the rights for a particular song. But with Kirby Shaw, he said, yeah, I'd love to help you out. And it's kind of interesting because our families have exchanged Christmas cards every year since then. And so, yes, it's important to me to make sure that we honor all copyright arrangements.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's part of that mutual respect. Like you mentioned, you have music that is out there, somebody could potentially use, and so you would appreciate the contact and asking permission or offering to pay a fee or whatever.
Right. And a lot of this comes, like with my music, it's arrangement for primarily brass quintet, and it's Christmas brass quintet, because a long time ago I had something called the Marshall County Brass Quintet, and I wrote all these arrangements and had them published, and it's easy to copy music and stuff like that without having to pay for it, and I know that. And so, when I get a royalty check for a couple of dollars,
makes you feel good.
It makes me feel good, yeah. Anyway, so I'm not making a lot of money on these arrangements.
I can imagine the Brewers on vacation, some faraway land, some faraway state, and you decide to go to a brass Christmas concert of a local ensemble, and you sitting there in the audience thinking, that does sound familiar.
I've heard that before. Yeah.
What are the odds?
Yeah. Well, I'm
sure it happens.
It has happened, that's for sure.
Goodness. Okay. So, talking about legal hurdles and organizational challenges, does each one of these shows face the same organizational challenges, such as, like, if you were building sets, getting costumes together, we talked about song rights, getting participants. Does one show have more interest than another initially before you get rolling? Or are people kind of familiar with them in this area now where they kind of know what it involves and what's coming? I think about rehearsal time, maybe. Like if you're doing a Broadway show and getting into some of those arrangements, do you require more rehearsal time than, say, a Christmas show where everybody shows up knowing the music? Well, you just have to make sure everybody's on the same page, so to speak.
Well, it's kind of interesting that you would say that. Again, it's going to depend on the concept of the project. Like Black Tie Broadway was more show choir focused and solo intensive, where Black Tie Christmas is more choral and there's just few scattered solos throughout. Black Tie Broadway required more staging and props and sets, and Black Tie Christmas and Black Tie America had limited backdrops. I think we just had one for the Christmas show. We didn't have any for Black Tie America because we used projections, and I created a lot of those projections to fit the music, and it was a lot of fun for me. And also Black Tie America and Black Tie Christmas used more lighting with singers on platforms than just a bare stage.
Yeah, so real time, that thought just flew right out of my head. I don't know where I was going with that. So
to further kind of answer your question, each show is ultimately different. The Christmas show doesn't have it had one backdrop, like I said, and it used the colors on the back white cyclorama, and Black Tie America had the projections in it and the singing of the national anthem and things like that, where Black Tie Broadway was more staged movement on the stage. And I loved Black Tie Broadway because there were 65 people to move on stage in different formations, and it was so much fun to watch everybody to get it. I think, too, the challenge on Black Tie Broadway was the fact that everybody had to memorize the music. Everybody had to memorize.
Because of the movement.
Right, because of the movement. And you didn't want to have a choral book in your hand going from one set to another. And I think it would have, when I say use the word flatten the experience of the audience going into that. Whereas they know what to expect in a black tie Christmas, you know, it's a sit down. But you mentioned something earlier too, that there are more people that will most likely come and participate in a sit down version of Black Tie America and Black Tie Christmas, just simply because they might be a little older, have a little more difficult time moving around, but also it will require less rehearsal for a sit down because you've got the music right there in front of you.
Yeah, true. So, has anyone ever come to you and asked for a black tie performance in their venue instead of us doing it here at the whole backstage, or like a church or a school or I don't know, name your venue, or have you thought about marketing the show to do as maybe an outreach? I don't know that that's quite the right word, but to maybe travel a little bit and have it in different areas.
Well, I was actually asked to bring Black Tie Broadway to Huntsville after we did it, but it was a year after that, and year after we performed this thing, and it would have been a huge undertaking to, you know, get all the props, all the sets, all the Surrey, and even to get the same singers to participate, because a lot of folks in Black Tie Broadway were seniors at our various schools, you know, in the choirs, and they were off at college, you know, a year later. I thought about taking a smaller version, but decided just against it, just because, you know, you had mentioned, you know, what about a small ensemble for that? It would have just, I think, been a lot more, in my personal opinion, a lot more effort to try to scale it down than anything. I was asked to consider performing Black Tie America at the it wasn't open at the time, but at the Sand Mountain Park Amphitheater for a patriotic celebration in July, do a concert at the amphitheater, and I think that would be a great partnership. The Fabulous 50s, I will have to say, way back when, the Fabulous 50s was asked to perform at the Hangout in Gulf Shores, but it was kind of like a weird time. It was like on a Thursday afternoon, and we wouldn't get paid or anything like that, but we were invited. One of the participants' sister was the venue manager down there. And anyway, so we were asked to do that, but we had too many conflicts. And we've performed bits and pieces of things like for Rotary clubs and the Civitan clubs and local clubs in Marshall and DeKalb and in Blount counties. And back in the day, they don't have it anymore. The Freedom Festival at Albertville, we used to be highly involved doing bits and pieces of shows in Albertville. So have I ever considered marketing? The problem with a review like that is the royalties fall on the venue. And so, like, I took Fabulous 50s and did Fabulous 50s at Sneed when I was the director of theater at Sneed, and also I Love Christmas at Sneed. The good thing about Sneed is they had their own ASCAP rights and own BMI rights, and they purchased, or the college or the theater department purchased the music for all of those. And so it was my show, you know, my development of the show, I Love Christmas and Fabulous 50s, my concept, but the royalties and the legal ramifications was part of Sneed. It wasn't part of the whole backstage.
Okay, so I remember also some summer celebration that happens in Aniana. Mm-hmm. Did the 50s show travel down there to do a promo? I think I went with the 60s.
You went with the 60s. You're right. And yes, but it doesn't fall on the venue that's asking the whole backstage.
Okay.
It falls if it's primarily the venue that is performing. That's where the royalties and the rights come into play.
That's all good information, because if this wouldn't happen, because I'm not that detail oriented and organized and proactive, honestly. But if someone were to write a show and just say, "Hey, I want to perform this show," it's a whole lot more that you got to pay attention to, or you could end up in trouble.
Yes, yes, absolutely, and you look, the U.S. copyright laws, especially for music, are just harsh and harsh. Just, those penalties are hard and harsh, and and I'm that when I mentioned something about the 20-second rule, actually I think it's like 47 seconds or something like that. You can play a clip of something on air publicly, but if you exceed that time limit, you could end up paying a big fine. It's become it could be a legal issue
if somebody wanted to make it one, I guess. If the right person wanted to follow through with that. So how does black tie? You mentioned the 50s. Mm-hmm. How does black tie relate to other projects that you've worked on, or has it come out of some of those to an extent? Like you were talking about the I Love Christmas shows and different things that kind of led to some of the black tie iterations. Right.
Well, the most popular and most performed of the reviews that I've created has been the Fabulous 50s, and you were in the last Fabulous 50, and I've just kind of retired that because we've performed it multiple times in its history, and I just love the music. It's a fun music, and when my son was, and John Everett, when he was younger, like 10, he'd never heard 50s music, and as he grew up, he became involved and was a singer, a performer, and dancer in the 50s shows that we did. And it's kind of interesting. He fell in love with that music. So did a lot of other young people his generation. So it's just a great way to introduce and keep it going. The program evolved from a small group back in 1990, I think, to over 30 in the cast the last time we did it. And again, you were involved in that. It's always been a sellout show. It was sold out, a couple of days before we even opened. And we've had friendships with folks all over Marshall County, including my friend Robert Cobb, who loaned us vintage cars from the 50s to showcase on stage. We had that 1957 Chevy, and we had the 1959 Corvette convertible, and it was just great. But here's kind of the interesting fallout from the Fabulous 50s. Folks like Tim Hayes and David Chupp, they were inspired to create their own musicals coming out of that. You mentioned the 60s a few minutes ago, and the 70s show that Tim and David created. Their stories were more, or their musical reviews, if you want to call them, had more storyline to them, and certain songs implanted in them, and to advance the storyline, whereas the review is just strictly music. Sometimes, somebody said, "Oh, I just walk out on stage and sing." Well, yeah, that's true, but a lot of times that's all people want.
You could put it that way.
Yeah, you could put it that way. But Tim Hayes and David Chupp, they were inspired to create their own reviews, and that's great, and I'm just so happy. And the 70s review and the 60s review here have been just really popular for that. I know David Chupp has created a Christmas story every year for his charitable organization, Room in the Inn.
Yeah, and I participated in one of those a few years ago, and it's a really neat opportunity to be a performer in one of those shows, but it's, they do a lot of good work.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm just proud of David and Tim, and I know they're using their creative juices to work for the community.
The Love in the 60s was the first show that my wife Kristen and I did together here at the theater. Not either of our first shows, but
right.
Our first show together. So that was a good memory for us. That whole show. I believe I was a background dancer for that one. As ill-advised a choice as that may have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know Kristen, she was involved in USO and the American Spirit.
Yes.
She and her sister, Sam, they were dancers and performers in that show before I think she had your last name.
True. I remember. I didn't get to see that show, but there's a lot. Everybody involved has very fond memories of doing that show or seeing that show. It means a lot to a lot of people. And I think even the Broadway show, Black Tie America has that sense of maybe community more for people who come and see it and experience the music together and can relate it to things that they see in their community or in their friend groups or whatever, and kind of filter that music culturally for the time. But even the Broadway show too, those shows affect people, and the stories within the shows, and the shows that the music that we do, just the excerpts, that the songs, the shows that they represent, mean something to a lot of people, and it's a different something to everybody. It could be a deep something. It could be, I just enjoyed watching this show one time, and the music hit me.
Well, we ended Black Tie Broadway with Seasons of Love from Rent, and before and I don't know if you remember, everybody was in the aisles, on stage, up in the mezzanine, and all 66 performers, they had certain spots, and the music, the voices just filled the auditorium, and by the time they hit the last 8 counts of music and holding that note, people were already standing up, and there were people behind me at the sound table, behind that audience members that were crying and stuff, because the music does resonate, and it will resonate for different shows with different songs, that kind of thing. So it is a powerful tool. I'm directing our summer musical, Gods and Dolls, which opens June 17th and runs through the 26th. You can call for tickets, 256-582-7469, or go to the WBS website, www.wholebackstage.com, and go to Tix and purchase your tickets now. But we were
I have to get this out before the show opens.
No, you don't. But here's the thing. We were talking about last night, during our rehearsal for Guys and Dolls, we were talking about this element. I used to teach theater at Sneed, and I would tell my students there's something called suspension of disbelief, and that suspension of disbelief is just simply being taken away in your thoughts and your mind from life's troubles, and just being put somewhere else. That occurs when we watch a really good movie, or listen to a really good concert, or we attend a play. We're taken away. And I think the music that we had and we performed in Black Tie Broadway had those qualities. It was something for everybody.
Right. Yeah.
Even the teens, they really loved that participation.
So that there I go again, losing my train of thought. But the stories that are woven, throughout all the different performances and audiences that come in and out, means something to people. And what you just said about suspension of disbelief, being in several shows here at this theater, we always do a cast circle before the show to just come together and get ready to do what we've rehearsed. And part of that may be people sharing their experiences in rehearsal, or why they're here at the theater, or what brought them here, or their appreciation for a new relationship maybe. But what is a common topic that always comes up is, that we come together to either bring the audience something funny, something meaningful, something musical, to kind of allow them to step away from stress, to step away from things in life that are hard to deal with sometimes.
Right.
And just give them an opportunity in this building to just be and to enjoy just sitting and watching something that is interesting.
Yeah.
Whether it's something
meaningful,
beautiful or funny or whatever, you're in that room and the lights are focusing your attention on the stage, and that's all that matters for that time period.
Right.
And as a performer, people ask, how long have you been involved with the whole backstage?
48 years.
48 years. So people ask, how? Like, what? Why? How have you been here this long, and why does it still mean something to you? And I don't want to speak for you, but putting my own experience into that question, it means something to me to bring that to people, to be part of the production that allows them that time to laugh, to cry, maybe to enjoy a presentation that we've worked on, that we're giving them, that is basically just an offering that hopefully is well received.
And I agree with that. But I think too, in addition to that, that's mighty powerful. I think for a lot of us here at the whole backstage, and again, I'm not speaking for you, but I understand that you might have some understanding of what I'm about to say. For a lot of us, this has been a safe haven for us, a place where we could come and we had instant friends and we had instant family. No one judged each other by what clothes they wore or what hairstyle they had, in that particular time period, especially the 80s. But nonetheless, this has been a safe haven for a lot of us here at the whole backstage.
Yeah, and I know that's part of the inception of its founding.
Yes, absolutely.
Was to give people who maybe didn't have a place to go a place to go.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It was Dot Moore, the founding mother, as our friend Andy Hunter termed. Dot was so inspiring and so inspirational that it kind of created itself, and out of sad circumstances too. Back in 1968, there were some deaths that occurred one summer of some teenagers during that time, and these were teenagers that attended Marshall County High School at the time. And Dot knew them, and I think one or two of them were in her humanities class at Marshall County High School at the time. And the city and city leaders, Porter Harvey from the Advertiser Gleam, and Dot all got together to create what was called the Teen Club at the time. And this was just a place for teens to go to stay out of trouble, to find a home, find a family. And it eventually, several years later, evolved into the whole backstage. It evolved into the whole backstage simply because then grown-ups, as Dot always said, grown-ups wanted to start playing and having fun and enjoy and creating just like the teens did. And so it became the whole backstage. And from that point on, we've had youth and adults alike, just participating in all the plays, whether it's backstage, on stage, or even out in the audience.
Yeah. And so we say the whole backstage is North Alabama's oldest continuously operating community theater.
That is true.
Are all those caveats necessary? Is it Alabama's oldest, or is it North Alabama's oldest community theater, period? Or
well, you have to put in the word continuous, because out of 50 years of being in existence as a community theater, the whole backstage, there are other theaters that were started way before, but in their history, they had breaks where they were disbanded or they didn't perform for 2 or 3, 4 years. They came back as another group. So as far as a community arts organization and a community theater organization, people certainly have, they certainly have a history. But for us, it's continuous, and that's kind of difficult for other theater groups to say. Even in Birmingham, there are theaters that are probably longer in existence, but have never had a continuous season.
Mm-hmm. And I read about a few that when I was trying to research that question. I read about a few who, there was a theater, maybe it's 150 years old, but it was a movie theater for a little while, mm-hmm. or maybe a storefront for, 10 years here and there, whatever.
Right.
And it's been restored to a theater,
mm-hmm.
which was its original purpose. But in the meantime, it's been several different things.
Right.
And I don't mean to get into another episode.
Yeah.
I kind of want that to be a whole episode on its own,
Absolutely.
where we talk about the history of this theater.
Mm-hmm.
Its inception, its different, its growth pattern,
right?
And where we are now, and where we hope to be.
Well, you can take the history of the whole backstage, and let me just kind of segue back into Black Tie. Black Tie was part of the early 1980s, musical review of 1980, 1982, 83, 89, and then it moved into Standing Room Only, and then it moved into, I Love Christmas, and then it moved into, USO, and then it moved into Fabulous 50s, and, it's evolved. All of those reviews that I've created have been kind of like the whole backstage. They've evolved into, I think, and, something that's meaningful, something that's important. Black Tie, Broadway. I think during Circle, we had to have double circles in Black Tie Broadway because, the young people were in the inner circle and the older crew was...
Did we do concentric or just a big infinity symbol?
Not an infinity, so it was just concentric, I guess. But, during those circles that you were talking about, that the whole backstage, well, let me just say this, started, and now just about every community theater in our area will do a circle. And they didn't do a circle. That was
a Dot Moore thing,
absolutely. Yeah. But nonetheless, there were a lot of people emotional during those circles.
Yes.
What did this mean to me, and being a part of this and being accepted. So just like the whole backstage, the Black Tie series certainly evolved, I think, into something that was meaningful and important to people.
Yeah, and that's the thing about, when a cast comes together in that circle, it may happen the first night, it may happen the last night, or every night, but mm-hmm. But, it does, it's amazing to see the connection that people have to performing a show or just spending time with people.
Exactly.
Some people don't have that. It's kind of a lonely time, and it has been the last couple of years for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But
absolutely.
To be able to come together and share an experience of putting on a show with a cast, mm-hmm. or to be able to share that show with an audience means something, whether you're on the stage or in the audience, for sure.
Absolutely.
So I think we've covered quite a bit about the Black Tie series, and I really appreciate you talking about it, because it's a series that I know you've worked, hesitate to even fathom a guess of how many hours has gone into the different aspects of these shows. But thank you for bringing them to the community. I mean, really, we've scratched the surface about how much each show has meant to an audience member or even a group of singers, but it's the depth is just,
it's a labor of love. For me, that's a creative outlet for me, and I love conducting. And the choral pieces are just fascinating to watch people's faces as I conduct and see the emotion that the performers get out of it.
Yeah.
Not only the audience, but the performers. And so, thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah. So we hope to have many more episodes coming. We've got tons of ideas of how to do that. What you can expect is interviews such as this, vocal performances, plays, radio plays, maybe some dramatic readings like we've had in the Black Box Theater here at the whole backstage. Really excited about 13 Days of Halloween prospects. So, hope to have a series coming out then. And obviously, any show that we produce that we can legally record, I'm hoping to maybe use that as a limited seasonal release or something like that. So
that would be great. Yes, and let me say thank you for taking the initiative to start this and getting this technology and getting us out there in a different format that we've never experienced before. So thank you very much.
Well, the things that go on in this building, I want to share with people.
Yeah.
And making that available on as many different platforms and in as many different formats as possible. If you're not somebody who likes to come sit in a theater, maybe you play podcasts on your phone.
Maybe so. Yes, absolutely.
So, we just want to give people a chance to interact. So, thanks again.